Today, we're diving into a really old text that, believe it or not, might just have the answer to our crazy modern-day arguments. It's called the Brahmajāla Sutta, which translates to the Buddha's Discourse on the Supreme Net. It's fascinating stuff.
You know that feeling, right? When you're stuck in some debate, maybe online or even just with a friend, and it just spins in circles. You make your point, they make theirs, and hours later, you're both right back where you started, only now you're way more annoyed. Well, it turns out this isn't a new problem. Not at all.
So, our story kicks off about 2,500 years ago. And we're not in some quiet, peaceful monastery. We're on a dusty road in ancient India.
Picture this. The Buddha and his group of monks are walking from one city to another. And right behind them, following along, are these two other guys, a teacher and his young student. And the dynamic between these two is just classic. The teacher, this guy named Suppiya, spends the entire journey just tearing the Buddha down, criticizing everything he says and does. But his student, Brahmadatta, does the complete opposite. He's just as passionate, but he spends the whole time praising the Buddha. They're just locked in this perfect, endless back and forth. So later that night, everyone's settled down to rest, and the Buddha's monks start talking about this. They're like, isn't it amazing? These two completely disagree on everything, but they're still following us everywhere. The Buddha, of course, overhears them and realizes, okay, teachable moment.
Now, you might expect him to launch into some really complex philosophical takedown, but his first bit of advice, it's incredibly practical. It's all about breaking that emotional cycle that arguments put us in.
He tells his monks, look, if people start criticizing me or our teachings, don't get angry about it. That anger just gets in your way. Instead, he says, just calmly point out what's not true. And on the flip side, if people praise us, don't get all excited and overjoyed. That also just gets in your way. Instead, just calmly acknowledge what is true. So step one is basically, get off the emotional roller coaster of praise and blame.
But that was really just first aid. The Buddha went on to explain that getting hooked by praise and blame is only a symptom. The real problem, the root cause, goes so much deeper. It's about the very nature of belief itself.
And this is where he introduces this incredible metaphor to show why people like Suppiya and Brahmadatta get so tangled up. He calls it the Brahmajāla, the supreme net, or, as we'll call it, the net of all views. He said that basically all the philosophical and speculative ideas that people get stuck on, well, they can all be sorted into a very specific number of categories, 62. The word for these in the Pāli language is ditthi. And a ditthi isn't just, a casual opinion. It's a deeply held, fixed belief about how reality works, about the self, the universe, everything. And the Buddha made a list of 62 major types.
Imagine each of these 62 views is a single knot in a gigantic fishing net. The moment you grab onto one of them, the moment you cling to it and say, this is the absolute truth, you're not just holding a knot. You become completely tangled in the whole net.
So what are these views exactly? We're definitely not going through all 62, don't worry. But they do fall into a couple of key categories that you'll probably recognize.
First, you've got views about the past and about what the self is. For instance, some folks, the eternalists, are convinced that the self and the world go on forever, totally unchanging. Others argue about whether the universe is finite or infinite. And then you have the people who just throw up their hands and say it's impossible to know, which, as the Buddha points out, is just another fixed position to get trapped in.
The other big category, of course, looks to the future and the afterlife. You've got annihilationism. That's the belief that when you die, you're just gone. Poof. Then there are all these complex ideas about whether consciousness continues after death and what that's like. There are even views that say ultimate peace can be found right here, right now, just by enjoying all the pleasures life has to offer.
Okay, so you see all these different options laid out, from we live forever to we're toast when we die, and the totally natural question is, all right, so which one's correct? Which one did the Buddha say we should believe?
And this is where the whole teaching takes a wild turn. Because the goal isn't to find the best knot in the net to hold on to. The goal is to see the net for what it is and figure out how to get out of it completely.
His answer was incredibly simple and totally profound. Which one is right? None of them. Not a single one.
The problem, he said, isn't what's in the belief. The problem is where all of these beliefs come from in the first place. He completely reframes the question. It's not about what we believe, it's about why.
And he says the source of it all is a little thing called phassa.
Phassa just means contact. It's that first, most basic moment of experience. It's when one of your senses, like your eye, makes contact with an object, like a tree, and in that instant, seeing consciousness arises. That little spark, that's phassa.
Now, here's the kicker. The Buddha's big insight was that all 62 of those grand cosmic philosophies are born from this simple process. A sensory contact happens, and it immediately creates a feeling. It's either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And what do? We crave the good feelings, and we try to push away the bad ones. And from that gut-level emotional reaction, we build these huge, complex, intellectual ideas, these dipthys, to justify why we feel the way we do. They're all just reactions, not reality.
So real freedom doesn't come from finding the right view to cling to. It comes from understanding the feelings that make us want to cling in the first place. Liberation is about seeing our feelings for what they are, where they come from, why they're gratifying, why they're dangerous, and finally, how to escape their pull. Once you understand the root feeling, the whole net of views just loses all its power over you.
So the question this 2,500-year-old text really leaves us with is a deeply personal one. This isn't just about ancient philosophy, it's about right now. What are the fixed ideas, the absolute certainties about yourself or the world that you hold on to? In other words, what net are you caught in?